Now, a soldier from Norwich has been arrested after joining an anti-war demonstration. Lance Corporal Joe Glenton led a protest in London last month against the presence of British troops in Afghanistan. He was already facing a court-martial for refusing to return to the conflict, and the new charges could carry up to 10 years in prison.
Next tonight, a former MEP for the East of England has been sentenced to 2 years in prison for fiddling almost £40,000 in expenses.
Tom Wise from Leighton Buzzard in Bedfordshire last week admitted lavishing the money on wine and a new car, as well as paying off credit card bills. Here's Neil Bradford's report.
This is Tom Wise bragging to an undercover reporter about how being a £60,000 a year MEP could make you shed loads of money. But it was his confession to a jury 3 days into his fraud trial that turned him from politician to prisoner.
Members of the public rightly expect integrity from those who are chosen to represent their interests. Mr Wise has abused his position as an elected representative. His conviction for false accounts confirms that he has now used taxpayers' money to feather his own nest.
The former UKIP MEP from Leighton Buzzard in Bedfordshire had initially denied false accounting and money laundering, but last week pleaded guilty, exonerating his researcher. Southwark Crown Court heard how he spent a year channeling £39,000 of taxpayers' cash into a secret bank account. The former policeman claimed a £3,000 a month secretarial allowance, but instead paid her just £500, spending the rest in support of his own interests, including £6,400 on a second-hand car, £6,800 clearing credit card debts, and almost £3,500 on fine wines. Sentencing Tom Wise to 2 years in prison, His Honour Judge Rivlin QC said this was a blatant and deliberate fraud. He said the position you had as an MEP was one of high privilege and trust. He said it's no exaggeration to say you had hardly got your feet under the table when you decided to defraud the European Parliament and the people you represented. Those he represented in his hometown of Leighton Buzzard appeared to have no sympathy.
Playing that sort of game, you get what you get.
He deserved it, to be honest. You know, you don't steal.
If he's been fiddling, he deserves what he gets.
Tom Wise must serve at least 1 year of his 2-year prison term. He's already paid back the money he falsely claimed, but now has to pay a further £30,000 towards costs. Neil Bradford, Anglia News, Southwark Crown Court.
Now then, there's speculation tonight that the former Conservative Prime Minister, Sir John Major, is considering a return to mainstream politics. That's if the Tories win the next general election. Sir John, who was elected as Huntingdon MP in 1979, stood down at the 2001 election. He told a select committee that having rejected a peerage before, he would now consider taking a seat in the Lords. Well, that would enable him to take a government post if David Cameron wanted to include him in any future Tory administration. Right next, 2 men from Essex are preparing to fly out to Cyprus to begin a 3-year jail sentence for the manslaughter of a teenager after their final appeal to the UK's Supreme Court ended in failure.
Cousins Luke Atkinson and Michael Binningham, who are from Witham, are due to be extradited on Friday. The pair spent today meeting up with their legal advisers in London, from where ITV's Lewis Vaughan-Jones now reports.
48 hours ago, they were as much in the dark as anyone. But now Luke and Michael know they're facing 3 years in a foreign jail. They'll be extradited to Cyprus on Friday. I asked them about the moment they found out.
It was just a shock, really. Felt a bit sick as well, but it was a shock. It had gone quiet for so long since we were last in court, and we were beginning to wonder what was happening, and then all of a sudden, just out of the blue.
We're just confused, to be honest. We can't understand how, from sitting in the back of a car to being acquitted, that all this time later it's still going on, and now we're looking at serving a sentence. It just doesn't make sense.
Michael lives in Clapham and Luke in Witham in Essex. But 3 years ago, they were on holiday together in Cyprus. They were passengers in the back of a car when it hit a moped and killed the rider, Christos Papyrus. The man driving the car, Julian Harrington, pleaded guilty to manslaughter and is behind bars. But Luke Atkinson and Michael Binnington were acquitted and free to go. The family of the man killed didn't feel justice had been done and nor did the Supreme Court in Cyprus. It overturned the decision and convicted Luke and Michael in their absence. Their solicitor here says it's simply unfair.
Ideally, obviously, I'd like them not to be extradited, but I accept that there is no further appeal procedure in the UK that we can pursue to prevent that extradition. What I would like now to happen is I would like the Ministry of Justice, Jack Straw, to intervene.
But that is unlikely to happen. As things stand, they have just 2 days of freedom left. Lewis Vaughan-Jones, Anglia News.
You're watching Anglia Tonight. It's just gone. More news now from where you live, and detectives have been talking to passers-by near a garage in Great Yarmouth where two men are thought to have committed suicide.
Yes, the same officers are investigating the disappearance of 30-year-old Derek Tempest, who's believed to have visited the garage on Blackfriars Road before he went missing 2 weeks ago. Here's Malcolm Robertson's report.
9 days after the deaths of the two men, their small backstreet garage in Great Yarmouth remains sealed off. This has been the scene of a major police investigation since the bodies of Jim Hall and Andy Venton were found in a car. And what's happened to 30-year-old father of three Derek Tempest remains a mystery. He was drinking in the Blackfriars Tavern and told friends he'd be paying a quick visit to the garage in Camden Place. The police are anxious to speak to anyone who might have seen him during his short walk there. What the police are still trying to establish is why Derek Tempest came here on that Wednesday. He didn't own a car, so there was no obvious reason for him to visit the garage, and why 5 days later did the two men who ran the garage commit suicide. 2 weeks almost to the hour since Derek Tempest went missing, police officers were on the streets trying to glean vital information that would explain his disappearance and the deaths of the two men.
There potentially could be a number of people out there that have had contact with the garage over that weekend who we haven't yet spoken to, so I'd urge those individuals to come forward.
It's a deeply distressing time for Derek's partner Sarah and his mother Leslie, who'd gone to the garage to ask if they'd seen him.
We were asking about Derek at 10 o'clock. 2.5 hours later, he's committed suicide. So what do you think? What I think went through my head. I've hurt my son.
Inquests on the two men who died will open tomorrow. The search for Derek Tempest goes on, but it's becoming an increasingly forlorn one. Malcolm Robertson, Anglia News, Great Yarmouth.
Police have confirmed that the body of a woman recovered from the sea off the Essex coast is that of an Ipswich woman in her 50s. Her body was discovered by the crew of a boat 4 miles from Harwich. The death has been reported to the coroner and is being treated as unexplained.
Tributes have been paid to the chief executive of Ipswich Borough Council, who's died suddenly at the age of 61. James Hare had been in the role for the past 20 years and in 2004 received an OBE for services to local government. He's been described as the driving force behind the transformation of Ipswich.
2 men have been arrested after a woman was shot in the head with an airgun at a car boot sale near Norwich. The woman in her 70s was struck by a pellet at Cossey last Sunday. It's believed that the weapon was accidentally triggered while being examined by a buyer. The woman was then taken to hospital and released the next day. A mother and daughter from Essex have taken on one of the country's largest house builders in the High Court and won.
Beauticians Sandra and Georgina Blackwell from Halstead couldn't afford lawyers in their battle over a development backing onto their business, so they fought the case themselves. Natalie Gray has the report.
They're blonde beauticians from Essex and say they're used to being the butt of jokes. But mother Sandra Blackwell and her daughter Georgina are having the last laugh on one of the biggest developers in the country.
They thought that we were two stupid beauticians from Essex that they could just railroad over, and this girl, 23-year-old beautician, took on a London barrister from the Strand and London solicitors and ran circles round them.
Bellway are building 43 apartments and houses on an old factory site next door to the Blackwell's House of Beauty salon in Halstead. They clashed over access and compensation, a 15-month fight that went all the way to the High Court. This is Sandra and Georgina's garden at the back of their shop. And I'm sure you'll admit it's quite delightful. That is, until you look up. And it's been like this since September. The Blackwells obviously didn't have the financial muscle to fight Bellway. Their business has been running for 6 years, employs just the two of them, and sells beauty treatments from £5. Bellway, meanwhile, is the UK's 4th largest house builder, sold more than 4,000 homes last year, and is among the FTSE's largest 250 companies. The Blackwells say they've suffered 15 months of misery, but £75,000 compensation and costs will make it all worthwhile.
We had the choice of losing absolutely everything or giving up or fighting them, and it was worth the fight.
Bellway, meanwhile, said tonight they had no comment. But for this mother and daughter, a champagne celebration, how they took on the big boys and won. Natalie Gray, Anglia News, Halstead.